A baby orca, motherless, sickly, and alone, shows up in Seattle's urban waters. Scientists are shocked when they discover she is hundreds of miles from her home range in Canada.
We were just amazed this little northern resident whale could have found her way all the way down into Puget Sound, and why she chose there to sort of stop and make it her home is anybody's guess.
As time goes by, the lonesome whale turns to humans for companionship. But experts believe her only hope for long-term survival is to be reunited with her pod.
This is a first. It has never been done before. This is a very high-risk situation.
In an unprecedented experiment, scientists and two governments work side by side to get an orphaned orca back home.
I think she's a survivor. I think she's probably already a legend in the orca community, you know.
Tonight, meet the lead scientists who identify the lost whale and try to remedy a situation they have never seen before in nature. We'll relive the orca's dramatic capture in Puget Sound and her 300-mile trip back to Canada, and watch the whale's attempts to fit back in with her family after she is finally set free. From rescue to relocation to release, join us now for Springer, an orca's journey home.
These are the spectacular waters off the northern coast of Vancouver Island. This area is the summertime playground for hundreds of whales, including a young orca by the name of A73, or Springer. Who could guess that one day this little whale would make international headlines? But our program tonight begins well before that, and far, far away, some 350 miles from here, in the waters of Seattle.
Mid-January 2002, an unusual visitor turns up in the waters of Puget Sound. It's a young orca, and she is all alone.
In general terms, it's very rare for a young orca to be alone, so this was a pretty unique circumstance.
Whale scientists Paul Spong and John Ford from Canada join U.S. researchers to help solve the mystery. They determine fairly quickly that the calf is about 2 years old and not one of the southern resident orcas that swim Puget Sound.
So it was a little bit of a puzzle there to figure out who this little whale in Puget Sound was. It took a combination of photo identification using natural markings, including the oval white eye patch, and the acoustics.
Besides individual markings, orcas can also be identified by their unique calls, shared only by close family members. When the solitary youngster finally offers up a good voice sample, the recording goes straight to Orca Lab, a remote research station off northern Vancouver Island.
It was such a mystery because she was just this little lone whale.
Helena Simons and Paul Spong have been studying orca acoustics for decades. And when Simons hears the call, she knows immediately who it is.
Oh my goodness. This must be her.
The little orca is A73, or Springer, a northern resident whale given up for dead. It is Springer's distinctive call that clearly identifies her as a member of A Clan, one of several pods that return to northern Vancouver Island every summer.
It was acoustics that, you know, solved the mystery, or at least defined where we should be looking. And it's all based on the idea that the calls are passed on from the mom to the offspring. So the degree of similarity of these calls with her mom clinched it for us.
In a computerized picture called a spectrogram, it's clear that Springer's call is identical to her mother's.
That's Springer. And this is Sutledge, her mother.
Once acoustics point to Springer, scientists officially confirmed the orca's identity using these photos, the last ever taken of A73 with A45, her mother. Canadian researchers are stunned that Springer is still alive. They assumed that both she and her mother had died when neither showed up in the summer of 2001. This video, shot in 2000 after Springer's birth, is the only known footage of the two together.
Just the fact that she survived, that she made that journey, and that she got down into that totally unknown place down there and figured out how to make it herself on her own as a tiny little whale, it's extraordinary.
Somehow, after her mother's death, Springer is separated from her pod and wanders more than 300 miles from home, something that whale researchers have never seen before. So why did this happen?
We'll never know. We've sort of dreamt up all sorts of possible scenarios, and so we sort of hypothesized that A45 might have got ill. Of course, her calf, young calf, would have stayed with her. A45 then died, A73's mother, leaving her on her own. We were just amazed that this little northern resident whale could have found her way all the way down into Puget Sound, and why she chose there to sort of stop and make it her home is anybody's guess. Something had to be done to save this little whale.
4 months after Springer first turns up in Puget Sound, federal officials announce a decision.
The best long-term chance for the health and survival of this whale would be if we moved her from her current circumstances, rehabilitated her, and returned to her natal area, which would be off the northern tip of Vancouver Island.
So nature will not be allowed to take its course here. Springer will be captured, rehabbed, and if well enough, returned to Canada.
We want to emphasize that this is a first. It has never been done before.
Inside the boat.
Springer's rewards, her favorite rubbing stick, and lots of massage. Now something new. The rescuers lead the orca up to the floating pen. Outside the pen's perimeter, more scratching and socializing. Then the team uses Springer's favorite stick to entice her into the floating cage.
Hi, little one. Hi. He knows.
She's only in there for a second, but the drill is still a success. At day's end, Foster says he's ready to try the real thing tomorrow, but adds these words of caution.
It's really not an event, it's a process. So it may take us a few days, and we might get lucky tomorrow.
June 13th, 2002. Capture day finally arrives. Everyone holds their breath as the little whale lifts out of the water and soars over to the waiting barge. Jeff Foster rides the sling to help balance Springer's weight.
Okay, everybody on board? Okay, take me over to the big boat.
The little orca is lowered onto a thick foam pad. She'll rest there for the short ride to the holding facility in Manchester. That trip will take less than an hour.
Well, she's resting really calmly. We saw some vocalizations earlier when we first put her in the stretcher, but she stopped now and she seems to be riding very well.
With temperatures above 90, Springer is packed in ice and continuously hosed down with cold water. Towels are draped over her back to prevent sunburn. In her net pen in Manchester, Springer's behavior is about what you'd expect from a 2-year-old. She clowns around a lot and tries to get attention.
I've been watching her quite a bit and seeing lots of play behavior when there's a log inside, even sometimes when there's nothing in there. She's splashing with her tail and rolling on her back. Some of the same behaviors that our biologists saw out in the wild.
As tempting as it might be to play with her, Springer's handlers must keep their distance. If the calf bonds any further with humans, it could threaten her return to the wild. The animal care team stays at arm's length by delivering Springer's fish down a long tube.
It was pretty coincidental. 2 hours after that, she started eating. She's been eating 55 pounds a day ever since. Up until that time, she was eating 5 to 10 pounds, 15 pounds a day.
She nailed that one. It's in her mouth. Now it's gone.
In a month, Springer will gain an incredible 200 pounds. Springer's return north will come almost exactly 1 month after capture. The orphaned orca is strong and restless. It's time to go home. At this point, U.S. and Canadian officials are finalizing details of Phase 2, getting Springer up north. This high-speed catamaran is offered for the job. The boat, fuel, and crew, all donated by the Nichols brothers boat builders of Whidbey Island.
Talked to my grandkids about it and some of the family, and they said, Grandpa, that would be a great idea. So I kind of got a little pressure from the grandkids to do this.
In just a matter of days, this special whale transport box is trucked in, courtesy of Six Flags, Ohio. An extra beefy platform is added to the catamaran's deck to support the heavy orca load.
About 11 tons, counting the tank, the water, and the baby.
No detail, too small.
There's heavy barnacle buildup on the bottom, and it's a jet drive boat, so what we have to do is clean out the intakes.
Everything looks good to go. July 13th, moving day, second try. To get an early start, the catamaran docks overnight in Manchester. At dawn, it's ready to receive its precious cargo. The operation begins when crews start pulling up the net around Springer's pen. When the pen is shallowed up, it's much easier for handlers to maneuver a 1,500-pound whale. Then the huge crane swings into position. The team guides Springer over to her stretcher. Some splashes and wiggles here as she goes in. Before the big lift, a few final adjustments. Then the little whale is up and away, soaring high over the catamaran's deck. The crane carefully positions the orca over her transport box, and down she goes.
Ready to go.
Just after 7 a.m., the catamaran pulls away from Manchester. Springer is finally speeding toward home. CNN beams live pictures of the event all around the globe. The boat's co-captain describes the mood on board.
Well, it's a certain amount of relief that we're underway and finally doing it. That's, I guess that's kind of the general. No, it's very, very positive attitude. The weather's nice, everything looks perfect.
At the very breezy back end of the boat, the animal care team keeps constant vigil. They'll be watching Springer for the entire 10-hour journey north.
We're monitoring her respirations. We basically count her breaths for a 5-minute period, about every 15 minutes. Just make sure they're staying regular and constant. We've taken her temperature a few different times, and just making sure that she's comfortable and resting well in her sling.
Fresh, cold water is being pumped into Springer's box from outside, and that, along with some ice, is keeping her cool. But a few hours into the ride, a gauge indicates a problem.
And the water actually is warmer than we had expected, so we're having to add a lot more ice to keep her nice and comfortable at the temperature she likes. And the nice part is we're going into Campbell River right now and get another 100 bags of ice, which should do us just fine.
Even though this stop at Campbell River isn't planned, a crowd is already waiting at the dock.
Hey, Campbell River!
In a flash, another 100 bags of ice are loaded onto the catamaran. Boat owner, crew, and passengers pitch in to help.
I'm just hoping somebody's counting.
Before long, the whole show is back on the road again. Canadian officials escorting Springer along the way.
Going great, the boat's running good, the whale's riding nicely, so we're having a great time.
At around 5 in the evening, the catamaran comes down the final stretch toward Hansen Island, thrilling the motley flotilla waiting to greet Springer. Orca researcher Paul Spong and his daughter are there too.
Well, it was a fabulous sight to see that boat coming up Johnson Strait. We were watching it through a spotting scope and getting bigger and bigger. We could actually see the box on the back of the boat as it went by, and it was a great feeling to see her home.
On a clear summer evening, a high-speed catamaran delivers a lost orca back to her native waters. The trip from the Seattle area to northern Vancouver Island, about 10 hours. In Canada, quite a welcoming committee on hand, from bald eagles to boats of every size and shape, even native tribes.
And when Springer arrived, they were there to greet her with their sailboats and their canoes, and people in their traditional costumes, and a spirit that came from the First Nations people here that I think lent an aura to the occasion that was really profound.
Also in the crowd, Canada's renowned whale researchers, Graham Ellis and John Ford.
I couldn't believe the scene, all the boats and the excitement, and the First Nations dugout canoes out, and it was tremendously exciting.
After months of wandering around all alone, 4 weeks in captivity, and a day's delay getting here, the little orphan is finally back where she belongs.
realizing that this little whale was coming back sort of home, if you like. It was a gratifying thing, but at the same time, being responsible for basically giving the okay to let her go, I certainly had some trepidation that, you know, okay, it's sort of our problem now.
This final leg, moving Springer to her new holding pen, will be a fairly quick one. A landing craft, or barge, will ferry the calf from the catamaran to her pen, just a few hundred yards away. This moment is a long time coming for many Canadians. The crowd seems genuinely moved when they get their first good look at Springer. As the barge pulls away, the rescue team gives a parting salute to the catamaran's owner and crew.
Thanks, guys!
Now Springer draws close to her pen, just one more short flight before she makes her final landing. An observer at the net pen provides a play-by-play description on a two-way radio.
Other divers in the pool now. They're beginning to swing the crane over the pool. Springer is very calm, very quiet. There are now 5 divers and 6 divers in the pool. Now they're starting to underneath. She's swimming. She just shook her dorsal fin.
Springer, at long last, back home.
Into the water. That's terrific. That went fantastic. It's just wonderful.
Dynamite. Never was really convinced I'd see this happen, where she'd actually get back up here, you know?
It went smooth as silk. I can't imagine anything that could have gone more smoothly.
We ask our Creator to watch over her, and also we ask that the family accepts her when they arrive. Thank you.
In mere moments, Springer starts showing off again.
Look at this. Just acting like she's been here all her life.
She was swimming around really quickly, slapping her tail, doing spy hops. It was just outstanding. I've very rarely seen whales respond so well to a transport. She did exceptionally well.
So to actually see it happen, and to see her respond so wonderfully when she, when she was dropped in the pen, yeah, it was. I don't think there was a dry eye on the net pen. This is not very scientific, but I think she knows she's home.
As it turns out, Springer's timing is nearly perfect, her family members having arrived back in these waters the day before.
That was one of the really interesting little bits of timing, because the A-24s, who are her NATO group, showed up on the 12th, which was the day she's supposed to come here.
Fortunately, her pod has turned up in the last few days, and indeed was just a few kilometers away from her current location earlier today. And there's so many variables that we're working with that it's hard to predict when this release might take place. It's going to depend on the time of day, the tide, the weather forecast, and the kind of interaction that we're witnessing between A73 and her group that will determine when the net will be let down.
It is now the morning after Springer's arrival back in Canada. Veterinarians announce she is in great shape.
From a veterinary medical point of view, there's nothing in her behavior or anything that I've examined on her to preclude release. So from a medical point of view, she's ready to go.
But even more exciting, overnight, orcas swim by the pen. Their calls identify them as the A11 and A24 pods, Springer's family, including her grandmother.
She became very excited, very animated, began to breach, to call very loudly, and to orient on the end of the pen facing out towards the open water. And she was obviously hearing the whales going by. Her calls were so loud they practically blew our headphones off.
This is Orca Lab's actual hydrophone recording of Springer calling out to her pod.
If the pod comes back during daylight hours and the same sorts of things happen as did last night, then she could probably go at any time.
After last night's exchange, scientists feel certain now that Springer will not hesitate to go. In her pen, the youngster is restless, looking out toward open water, pushing at the net, calling out. The big question now is, when will her relatives, the A24 and A11 pods, be back?
We're all very optimistic that a release could take place in the next couple of days, but I wouldn't say a couple of hours necessarily.
But only about an hour later, Springer's relatives are spotted just a few miles away, and they're heading toward the pen.
Both the A11s and the A24s, from where we saw them, have come around and are headed down Blackfish Sound. So if there's a repeat performance of last night, and they come by and she can hear them, she's gone.
Now everything shifts into high gear. A float plane swoops down to deliver Springer's tracking tags. They'll need to be attached before the little orca can go free.
This is one of the tags. It's just a suction cup tag.
Out on the water, the scientists radio in. The whales are coming closer. Springer's grandmother isn't among them, but these are still her closest relatives.
We were, of course, discussing amongst ourselves constantly whether, well, what if they go into the bay? What if they, approach the pen? Why wouldn't we let her go?
Divers suit up at the pen. The net is pulled up shallow. Despite all the excitement, Springer just calmly munches a snack.
That's how I'm gonna go pretty relaxed.
Under enormous pressure, Springer's handlers manage to get all 3 tags stuck onto her back.
The tags are on, all 3.
It's not a moment too soon.
They're right around the rock.
Look
closer now.
just to the right of the rock, and look at right here.
Jeff, they're actually coming closer.
The big male is coming right towards us.
Almost as if scripted, Springer's relatives line up outside the bay waiting. Springer calls out.
All the ingredients were there, and everybody seemed to be in agreement, so we said, let's let her out.
Drop the net, open it up. It's being done now.
Got her over. Ready? Push her under.
Nose, go ahead.
We're off.
Yes! Sweetie, go! Woo!
That must feel good, eh?
Well, let's
How
see.
long's that been?
It's been a month. Month and a day. That's excellent.
Yes, a month and a day since her capture and less than 24 hours home. Springer is free. Just 21 hours after arriving back home, Springer is released into her native Canadian waters. It's a Free Willy moment you just can't see enough.
It was pretty much euphoria. I mean, the second day we're up here, it was just about as good as it could possibly be.
I'd like to know what my heart rate was.
But A73, or Springer's first encounter with family, isn't exactly a Hollywood moment.
A73 swam straight out as soon as the net was released, headed straight for the whales, and swam up to within about 100 yards of them. The group of whales in the pod milled around, and as they moved out of the bay, A73 stopped and played with a piece of kelp and played with the stick. And then she actually slowly moved off to the west. The other male whales slightly moved off to the east.
Of course, we all would have liked her to swim right up to the pod and mingle in a great greeting ceremony, and that would probably be just a fairy tale kind of ending, These are complex social animals. We don't really understand their dynamics. It might take a while before they come to accept her.
Springer spends her first few hours of freedom all alone. But later that same day, she tries tagging along with a group of orcas.
She's apparently within about 1 kilometer of her pod, and last I heard she was moving along sort of slowly behind them.
But then Springer resorts to some of her same old habits.
She, over the next few hours, started approaching boats and wanting to rub and interact with them, and we thought, this is not what we wanted to see.
The day after Springer's release, the same team that captured, rehabbed, and transported her goes out to track the little whale down. They know that 2 of the 3 radio tags are still attached.
We have great conditions today for tracking. It's glass calm, so we can see her from a distance. So what we want to do is be as far away from her as we possibly can and monitor her from afar.
At twilight, a pod of orcas cruises by, and the tracking team picks up Springer's signal nearby.
She's up. Yeah, she's just she sounds like she's right in here.
Although it's too dark now to see her, the hydrophone confirms that Springer is out there with other killer whales, her call echoing among theirs.
It's getting kind of late at night, so it's hard to actually get a visual on her, but she's definitely out here. She's in very close proximity with the other whales. The tag's still on. We know both tags are working, so she'll be able to find her first thing in the morning.
The following morning, 2 days now after Springer's release, the tracking team gets an early start. On a foggy morning like this, Springer would be virtually impossible to find without those radio tags.
Is that chirp? Huh? Did you get a chirp?
Nope. Nothing yet.
The tag chirps every time Springer's back breaks the surface, the signal picked up by our radio antenna. Off in the distance, Springer is finally spotted, up close to the shoreline. There's only one tag left on now, and the team that's come to know this little orca so well is disappointed to see her all alone.
Here she is.
But even more disheartening, Springer comes up alongside the boat looking for attention. When she doesn't get it, she heads for another boat.
I was wondering if we could ask you to move a little bit out of the area. This is Springer, and we want to try to give her every chance we can.
I've got the feeling that what we're observing is her starting to make choices. She's still interested in the motorboats, no doubt about it. But she's also appears to be potentially as interested in her other like animals. I'm giving her some time, and I think that's the prudent thing to do.
After several days, all of Springer's tags fall off, as they're designed to do. But a network of Canadian whale watchers are in place to begin tracking her whereabouts visually from several observation points.
Paul Spong is one of the scientists following Springer. Using scopes and hydrophones, he tracks her movements as she struggles to find her way back into the wild.
Certainly, the boat behavior was a problem, and I was very impressed by how quickly she got through it. But it was ultimately the whales that did it for her.
She ended up by fairly quickly bonding with A51, this young whale from A5 pod. And A51 herself is a bit of an orphan. She lost her mother when she was about 8, I believe, 7 or 8.
It was very clear that A51 was taking very direct measures to keep Springer from approaching boats. We know she did it on at least a couple of occasions that were witnessed, and probably others.
Brian Faulkner is one of those people who witnessed A51 protecting Springer. He saw the older orca roughly shove the calf away from his whale-watching boat.
Just as it was getting close to the boat, just lifted her right out of the water with her head and just got between her and the boat and gave her a flip back away from the boat. And everyone on board the boat was just thrilled. Oh, wow, look at that, did you see that? And said, yeah, that was a spanking.
For the rest of the summer, Springer stays away from boats. And scientists say this video is evidence that the unprecedented experiment to reintegrate an orphaned orca with her family is working.
You know, she's right in among them. And whenever we see her, she looks comfortable, she looks functional.
It's mostly good news, but there is still concern that Springer has not completely bonded with just one surrogate mother.
She's bounced back and forth, it seems, between her own pod with one female A56 and this other female A51 in A5 pod. It could be that if either of these surrogate mothers have a calf of their own, they may be less receptive to having A73 around.
Our feeling about her is that regardless of who she ends up with, she's not going to let them go. You know, she's not going to allow them to disappear from her, as must have happened when she got lost last year.
There is one more big test that Springer must pass before her reintroduction can be considered a complete success. You'll find out what that is up next. Springer is now back among the northern residents, a community of whales here in Canada whose numbers continue to fluctuate. Right now, somewhere around 200 individuals.
They dropped from a peak 4 years ago of around 215 to 16. So their numbers have dropped slightly, and we don't yet know if it's a long-term trend.
You know, in a general sense, I think you have to regard the population as being in some jeopardy for all kinds of reasons.
The same reasons, in fact, that threaten Puget Sound's orcas: pollution, lack of food, stress from boat traffic. Scientists say these declining populations need every individual, and that alone justifies the big effort to save Springer.
The status of the population at large is such that every female that's able to contribute to the future of the population is important. So just at the level of population status and biology, I suppose you can say that she has real significance.
Springer's fame is also bringing more tourists to northern Vancouver Island. When her story went international, it put the tiny town of Telegraph Cove on the map. Jim Barrowman charters whale watching trips out of there.
The whole North Island probably will benefit for many, many years for people that will want to keep coming back and seeing where this little whale lives. It spends a lot of its life.
Yes!
After her exciting dash to freedom in July, Springer needed time to learn the ways of the wild again. And it took time for Springer's pod to accept her. But now scientists believe she's right on track.
There she is in the back.
You know, she's right in among them. And whenever we see her, she looks comfortable, she looks functional. I think all together we feel that she's part of the larger group now.